and welcome to No Notes, the show where three cerebral cinephiles take a break from chatting guilty pleasures to discuss cinematic treasures. Each month, we'll take turns selecting a film we believe to be virtually flawless, one that had a significant impact on our lives and or helped shape the film lovers we became. If you love movies, if you really love movies, this is the show for you. My name is Stephanie, and I'm one of your hosts on this journey of great cinematic exploration. I'm joined by my two fellow film heads, Kelly and Jack. It was Kelly's turn to pick the No Notes treat for us this holiday season. I'm going to turn it over to her and let her tell us what she's picked for us and why she's picked it. Kelly?
Ho, 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 friends. I have chosen 3 Christmas classics, depending on your definition of classic. I picked 3 movies that I love. They're actually specials. They're not feature length, but they always make me feel warm and fuzzy around the holidays. I think that they are perhaps lesser known. I chose Emmett Otter's Jug-Band Christmas, which is certainly not as well known, and to be fair, not as good as the Muppet Christmas Carol, but still is absolutely delightful. It has Jim Henson's beautiful Muppet work and songs by Paul Williams, which if you know anything about me, you know that the second I see songs by Paul Williams, I'm all in. It has a cute little riff on The Gift of the Magi, and it has possibly the greatest fake badass band in the history of the world. I also selected Opus and Bill's A Wish for Wings That Work, which I believe was aired exactly once, but boy, oh boy, did my family see it when it aired. And we recorded it off of the TV and we watched it every year until there was a way to watch it not on a VHS with 7-Up commercials in between. It is an extremely odd little holiday curio that I find delightful and charming, that features extremely brief voice work from Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman, if you can believe it. And the last special I chose was the Bob's Burger Christmas episode from, I believe, 2 years ago, called The Plight Before Christmas, where Bob and Linda have Christmas programs for all 3 kids to go to and have to try and figure out a way to manage it. And I watched it, I'm going to say, a half an hour before we started recording this. And for the 3rd year in a row, it made me cry ridiculously, embarrassingly, humiliatingly even. But I'm not really ashamed, because isn't that what Christmas is all about? Sincerity. Let's go with yeah. That and presents. Guys, what'd you think?
So, Kelly, you had a recommendation for us as far as the order to watch these in, which I thought was actually really spot on. I don't know, like your assessment of giving it the most emotional gravitas really rang true for me. Is that the order that you would like to talk about these in?
Yeah, I think that would be a good way to do it. I think that, if organically they bleed together in any way, we should let that happen. But I do think that maybe we kick it off with Emmett, chase it with A Wish for Wings That Work, and then bring it on home with the Deep Hurtin'.
Perfect. Well, I should start and tell you, and I'd like to hear from Jack as well, that these were all first-time watches for me.
Yay!
So that was pretty special. I was like, okay, I am surprised I haven't seen any of these. So it was really fun going into them completely blind and not knowing what to expect.
I love that.
What about you, Jack?
Well, I am a big Bob's Burgers fan and have been for a while. Not since it came out, but I got into it about 5-6 years ago and have seen every episode. I just have not seen the movie. I did not know that it was actually on Hulu now, and so I just discovered that today, and it is queued up and ready to go right after this podcast, so I can make up for my deficiency. Huge Bob's fan, and I have seen this episode several times. This is one of the few shows, one of the few kind of any kind of visual media that I will put on kind of behind the scenes if I'm wrapping presents or I'm doing something that doesn't require full attention. This is one of the very few exceptions I will make to just have it on the background, because I typically I've seen them all enough times that I don't need to see them, but I still just love to experience them.
Because it's
Otter
so warm
is
and
kind
fuzzy, right?
Yeah, it is. It's just, yeah, exactly. It's just like
I'm
that
the same
cozy
way.
blanket,
Bob's is just like such a comfort show that like
it is.
Yeah.
Emmett Otter, it's weird because I have seen it before, but it's been a very long fucking time. I must have been 6, 7, maybe. And watching it is kind of tickling something in the back of my mind, like, okay, this is familiar. Not just because it's Muppets, not because it's Jim Henson, not because it's Frank Oz. This is familiar because it's familiar, and things started to click into place. Now you're like, oh, this is going to happen next, and it did. It's like, okay, yep, I have seen this. I just can't place the time frame. I know it was in our very, very tiny little duplex house that my mom and I lived in when she first like had enough money to buy a place. So I know I watched it. And it was just so incredible to kind of go back down memory lane on something that I had completely forgotten about, basically. And no, but Opus and Bill, first time watch for me on that one.
Yeah, I felt relatively confident that neither of you were going to have seen A Wish for Wings that work. I thought with the other two, there was at least the possibility. But that one, I was pretty sure, because historically, when I've introduced anybody to that, they've been like, what the fuck are you talking about? I've never heard of this. What? And then, mind's blown.
For sure. Yeah. I know that, the watch order that we had was Emmett Otter, then A Wish for Wings That Work, and then the Bob's Burger special. And I would say of all, spoiler alert, loved them all. But A Wish for Wings That Work is the one that I have the most notes on, that I have the most to say about, because I was like, this is really kooky, but in such a delightful way. It's just really different and weird and a little off kilter, but just in a way that 1,000% works. I just like love the shit out of it. I don't want to jump ahead, but
that's okay. I think that probably my guess is that the thing that we're going to have the least to say about is probably Emmett Otter, because I think in some ways it's the most straightforward. Like,
yeah,
it's, the gift of the Magi, which everybody knows. And I think that feel like I know all three of us well enough to know that like just a basic affection for Muppets is going to make it hard to not feel charmed and warm and fuzzy towards this, just based on like the greatness of seeing Jim Henson's adorable creations doing seemingly impossible things for Muppets to do, but also just being as warm and charming as you usually expect the Muppets to be.
Even more so, honestly, in this one, I would say, like, even more so, just touching on the topic and kind of the general feel of this one, where, Sesame Street and any of the Muppet shows were largely all inclusive, right? It was it was a little bit of everything. Where this one with Emmett Otter really is more just focused on like those less fortunate. That's really the focus of it. So I'd say more than even the traditional Muppet, more than traditional Jim Henson storytelling, this one kind of hits a little harder and hits a little, like, I think a little deeper, because it goes into like a more depressed era, a more depressed location, kind of. And as a kid watching it, you don't necessarily realize that, but as an adult, it's like, this is touching on some pretty tough stuff, in a very wholesome, loving, and respectful way. But this kind of goes deeper than what you'd traditional think for the puppetry, and I like huge kudos for that.
Yeah, I think like every time I watch it, I'm always kind of blown away by the decision to have the River Bottom Nightmare Band win the talent show, because like by every rule of a holiday special, a children's show, like Emmett or Ma should have won, right? Like they should have won the talent competition. And certainly the River Bottom Nightmare Band, even though they are undeniably cool, because come on, they're pretty cool. They shouldn't have won because they're like jerks, they're dicks, but they actually win the competition. And I thought, like, what a kind of brilliant way to say, like, there's going to be disappointments, and sometimes the people you don't want to win are going to win. And like, to to actually include that really surprised me. I did not expect that the first time. And every time I watch it, I think again, like, wow, they could have pulled their punches and they could have figured, well, we'll say that the judges awarded them both the prize or, something like that. And yes, they give that ending of they get to work at the hotel, but like to actually have the seeming, as much as there's a villain in it, to have them win is such a unexpected move, I thought.
Yeah, this movie goes hard. And I think that's partly because of the time frame in which it was filmed, right? This was late 70s. And, look at the films, like the children's films of the late 70s and early 80s, where they weren't so coddling as they are now. Like, hell, almost every single 80s kids movie is fucking nightmare fuel, if you think about it, but that's just, I don't know. I just think that I think older films, older specials, weren't so quick to dismiss that kids can handle a little bit of tough stuff, that they're not so fragile that they can't handle a little bit of hard truths, like they didn't really pull those punches back then. And I think that stories like this and like specials like this are better for it.
Agreed. Steph?
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate that it is a little, it's dark, sounds like a crazy thing to say, but it is a little bit like, you're dealing with like loss and, a family that really genuinely has nothing. Like not just like they don't have a lot, but they really almost don't have enough to survive. Like they are scraping by, but still so, joyful and loving and full of life and full of hope. And there's beauty and warmth. And I love things like, I just have a very, very soft spot for things that are very sweet, that make you feel something, but that don't feel manipulative. They feel sincere. They don't feel saccharine. They feel like this is just a really pure story about what it means to love someone, what it means to be selfless, what it means to like give of yourself, and to have hope in the darkest of times, to not be taken by despair, but to still try to find the beauty in life. And I think that, it is the kind of very definition of what the holidays should be about. Rarely are. They're mostly about commercialism and how much can we buy and, how much stress can we endure and all that stuff. But like for something to strip that all away and really just focus on what actually matters, in a way that just like gets you in the feels and is so just charming and fun and, delightful to watch. It's like, it's not maudlin, even though there's like heavy subject matter. It's really like sweet and fun. And, it definitely got me. And I was very surprised that I hadn't seen it. I'm a big Muppets fan. But yeah, I love the shit out of it. And as soon as I heard the music and saw that it was Paul Williams, I was like, oh, no wonder Kelly loves this.
Right.
Because the music
6 Degrees
is fantastic.
Of Paul Williams.
Yeah.
Yep.
The music is so good. And like, once again, in a very like Phantom of the Paradise Light sort of way, he's doing a bunch of different genres in this, and doing them all really well. Like the opening song about the grandmother's bathing suit is so funny. And like, it's all kind of predicated on a little bit of a fat joke, but like at the same time, it's not really making a fat joke. Like it's just making a kind of funny observation about it, but all done with like extreme fondness for the grandmother, but it's really funny. And in that rapid fire way that, only Paul Williams, I think, can do in song, that like is so clever and so quick, but also like works perfectly with the rhyme scheme somehow. And the song that the River Bottom Nightmare Band does is like basically you could imagine Beef doing that. Like it's
I love it so much.
Like it's huge and it's really good. And you're like, yeah, okay, I get it. They're jerks, but they deserve to win. That bear deserved to win.
Yeah. And it feels like so disconnected from the rest, but in a way that's not bad. Like it's a good kind of disconnected. It's very weird. It's very sort of like a little bit dark and twisted. And it absolutely fucking works. It's like it's such a great, it really took my breath away. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening right now.
It's actually kind of like a dark look at the alternate, like a alternate universe of the Muppets, where Fozzie Bear is like a fucking heroin dealer, drug gang member. Because I mean, it's basically Fozzie Bear just strung out on heroin, you know. But it's funny because it's like you look at that, and it's so dramatically different than the kind of podunk, you know, like grassroots music that starts off. Although I do have a note, and I love it because you touched on that, is that, you know, that first song is probably about the most wholesome song about obesity that could ever exist, you know. Right. Where it tackles it in such a lighthearted, like loving manner. It's just, you know, and I think that's just this. I think that's this special in a nutshell. You could not pull this off in today's environment or with today's sensibilities or humor in a way that this film does, you know. And I know it's based off of a book, which is based off of another book. And I get that, but I also, you know, it's the way that they touch on these certain topics without ever beating you over the head with it. Again, speaks to a mature type of storytelling that, yes, even though this is obviously a production geared towards children, that the children are not going to get the most out of this. Like adults are going to get much more out of this than a kid ever would. And it's kind of ironic looking back at this from my perspective, because we grew up pretty damn dirt poor, not this dirt poor, but pretty close, you know. And so it's very interesting to me to like look at the parallels, you know, to my own childhood and be like, hot damn, like this thing like hits so hard, because it not only do I have memories of watching it vaguely, but I have memories of living it, you know. And so it's like, holy shit, like this really spoke to a certain subset of children back in the day that I think were largely ignored.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jack. And I just want to touch really quickly on what you said about not being able to make it in today's climate, because I don't think you couldn't make it because of the audience. I think that there will always be audiences for things like this. And I don't think that audiences have gotten so cynical that they wouldn't appreciate this. But I think, unfortunately, studios have decided that it's not profitable enough, I guess, or I don't know, not cheap enough or whatever to make things that are this artistically driven. Because I was thinking, there's a relatively recent Muppet Christmas outing that's like sort of cute, but it's sort of Kermit has an It's a Wonderful Life kind of like, what if I was never born sort of thing. And I watched it and it was like, fine, but it's obviously after Henson was dead, and the music is done by somebody. Like, I don't fucking know who it was, but while I was listening to the songs, they're very like generic, like everybody's important and everybody matters. And I was like, this is why you need Paul Williams, because like the music in Emmett, Otter isn't just giving you like a really like on the nose kind of message. It's all really, really good music, but it's also subtly getting the point across. But even within like also the design of the characters, like all of those otters are so beautiful, and every character is just gorgeous. They're so articulated. And I mean, only Jim Henson could possibly make a puppet within a puppet, sort of two people in a horse dancing puppet thing. Yeah. Like that's just so like, and I was thinking about how I think a lot of animated characters, I think are kind of ugly now. Like they just don't have that kind of care and rendering and beauty to them. And all of these characters felt very real to me. They felt very specific and very lived and authentic. And I do believe there's always going to be an audience for that sort of thing. I just don't know that studios care enough to do it anymore. And I think part of what makes Emmett such a good and such an enduring special is that there's obviously a lot of love put into it. Like it was not necessarily something that was done for like a quick payout. It was done because people gave a shit and wanted to make something beautiful.
There was nothing quick about this. Like you look at, and if you read like a little bit of what happened on this particular production, where they're talking about the differences between the Muppet Show, where it's platform upon platform upon platform. So you've got these layers where people have room to work within a platform, and then above them is a different Muppet who has room to work. And this one is like almost full type sets, where they've designed the sets around these puppets so that you had to get underneath the floor or get in the water. And I think that, speaking of cost, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head, because I think this is the kind of thing that, nowadays the studio is going to go, this is all going to be CGI. This is all going to be animated or whatever, and it takes I'm not going to say that animation doesn't have a place, because it absolutely does. But there's something about this tactile production, which was, if the only other thing you had back in the late 70s was cartoons. It was that or this, right? You didn't have a whole lot of other options to kind of get that, out of reality, look to a show. So, this one, especially more than anything else at the time, is just jaw dropping in how amazingly detailed these sets are, and how, you have all this other stuff happening in the background that has nothing to do with the show. You got Emmett and his mom, going on the boat to deliver the laundry that they do, and there's ducks in the water that are just swimming around, and their heads are swiveling and they're quacking, and it's like somebody's controlling those under the water. Somebody's down there moving these ducks around, and it's not adding anything to the scene other than natural ambiance of what you would probably see on an actual river, and I think just the level of detail that kind of went into this kind of production isn't just something that was like, hey, this is gonna make money, or hey, this is gonna captivate. This is love. Like, this is for love of the craft. I think more than any other type of filmmaking that I've seen. Like, it's all, you can see it in every angle, in every shot, in every move of the puppets. You can see people that, obviously love their craft, doing what they get to love, for a good cause. I think it was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it opens with Kermit on a fucking bicycle. Like, that tells you, like, Jim Henson is just, like, showing off now. Like,
right?
He's going to just, like, blow your fucking mind with what he does with these puppets. Like, when he has Ma and Emmett going down that ice luge, like, that had to be so difficult to do the way that they did it. The care that was taken in the precision of those movements, like, to be able to do that with these puppets is, I think people probably underestimate just how hard it had to have been.
Agreed.
The amount of craft that went into it. But like I said, he just announces himself. Kermit comes in on a bicycle. Like, that's crazy. It's so unbelievable to think about making a marionette do that.
Right.
Steph, I think you had something to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I was going to kind of build upon something you said earlier about just the intricacy of these characters, is that I don't remember how long this episode is, but it's pretty short. Do you remember off the top of your head?
48 minutes.
Emmett Otter? It's about 45 minutes.
Okay. And in that time frame, like, you genuinely, like, feel like you understand who each of these characters is without any real backstory, without a lot of, like, narrative or time with these characters. It's so they all feel very distinct, very authentic. They're full of so much life and so much personality, and each one is so, different and special. And you get so, like, there's so much world building and so much immersiveness in this fairly short special. And it's really remarkable, because even, you see modern stuff where there's tons more time and tons more setup and these massive budgets and stuff, and you still don't get the same level of world building that you're getting in this, like, really sort of just very, very simple, straightforward, really sweet tale that, I don't know, makes you feel like, so it's so odd to say, but you're so connected to these Muppet characters, and you feel such a, like, empathetic bond with them. And I feel like that's just it's so special.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think that, like, to be able to be as impactful as it is without being emotionally manipulative or going for, like, the cheap, obvious, like, it's alluded to that Pa Otter is dead, but, like, they don't overplay that for, a tearjerker moment. And to really just kind of have above and beyond, I guess maybe the unifying theme between these three, and I didn't really think about this before, is that instead of trying to make you cry by making you sad, I think that they're trying to just be joyful. Truly and genuinely joyful. Yeah. And that makes me cry. Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah, 100%.
Find the beauty in the little things. Yep.
Yeah, like, the whole thesis kind of Emmett Otter is established really early on with Ain't No Hole in the Wash Tub, which is a song that I walk into rooms singing all the time. Which is just like, it's not even specifically about the wash tub, obviously. It's just about like, you know, sure, things are shitty, but like they could be worse. And so focus on the things that aren't bad. Focus on the things that are good. And like, it's such a simple, sweet, beautiful little statement to carry throughout the entire thing, that like, there's never a point where it wallows in self-pity, even after the thing is over and she knows that there's a hole in the wash tub, you know, like they're still happy. They're still walking along, singing together. Like it never takes that moment that you expect in a lot of Christmas specials where all hope is lost and, you know, everybody's sad. And it's like, oh no, they're not doing that. Right. It's just joyful.
And that's so rare. And I also love, like, you don't get a moment of like, oh, this sucks, we're not going to have a Christmas, or like, man, I hate being poor, I'm not going to get anything. There's no selfishness. There's no, like you said, wallowing in like, this is a really shitty life and we're really unfortunate and it's really not fair. Even when they lose the competition, that they sort of like, you know, put all their eggs in that basket of like winning this competition, so that they could have a special Christmas and do something for each other. It's like, there's not a moment of like feeling sorry for themselves or feeling dejected. There's just like, hey, we did our best. Like, it's really special that we got to do this. It's special that we have each other. And and honestly, like, I feel like it's what is special that I really needed to see at this time, because it really puts things into perspective. And you're like, yeah, you know, things could always be worse, and you need to focus on what's good and beautiful and joyful, and just strip things down to like what really matters and strip away all the bullshit. And it got me deep in the feels, and I loved it so much. And I was so grateful to have seen it.
There's also a thing that I think a lot of, I'm kind of air quoting children's specials here, do that, where they like to make it that the kid has to learn, you know, that Christmas isn't all about presents. And I actually really loved that this didn't do that. That like Emmett from the beginning, his motivation isn't to get something for himself. It's to do something for his mom.
Yep.
You know, and I thought that was really sweet, that instead of having it be that Emmett's like, you know, the kind of typical greedy kid or whatever that they like to do in these specials, who has to learn, you know, that instead he just wants to do something nice for his mom. And that's his motivation throughout, pretty much. Like, yeah, he sees the guitar and he thinks it's beautiful, but like his big thing is just that he wants to give his mom a nice Christmas. And it's kind of nice to see kids represented as not just like little greedy monsters. And I will say that, like, I have a reoccurring Christmas anxiety dream where I haven't gotten people presents, where I wake up on Christmas morning and find out that I haven't gotten people presents, and it's like horrifying anxiety. And I think that one of the things Emmett Otter does well is, especially as you get older, the idea of being a parent or an adult in a child's life and not being able to give them the Christmas you want to is really heartbreaking. You know, like feeling like you're not able to provide this thing that would make them happy, whether it's Christmas or any other time of the year, you know, just feeling like you can't offer somebody you love something that they want or need is really devastating. And I think that it touches on that in a really light way, but in one that I think maybe appeals more to the adults in the audience than it does to the kids.
Oh, it's spot on. Yeah. As a parent, it's spot on, you know, because even though I consider myself pretty thoughtful when it comes to that with my kids, where it's not just like, here's some money. Like I do try to find like thoughtful gifts, or I listen to them throughout the years. Like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm like, okay, make a note, you know, but you know, it's one of those things, because it's kind of that reverse thing where you're saying too, where it's, you know, he's not presented as a typical child who's, I want this and this and this and this. I mean, he just knows that his mom regrets ever selling that piano. Like he knows that that's like her biggest regret. And he's just like, fuck it. Like, we're not having that, you know, not on my watch. We're going to get, and he knows that he can't even get her a new one. He's just going to get her a used one. And she doesn't even care. Like, she just, you know, I just love that it doesn't sugarcoat any of that stuff. You're right. It's exactly it. It's, you know, he is not greedy. He knows from the start what Christmas is really about, you know, and the show knows from the start what Christmas is really about, and they just lean fully into it. And it's just like, I love that. I just, as a parent, especially, I love seeing that in a show that, again, doesn't have to like beat it over your head repeatedly or just out and out say it. You know, it realizes that the audience is smart enough to just pick up on that. It's a pretty, it's a pretty known thing. We can follow. Thank you. Like modern Hollywood, we got it. So I love that this one just presents it. Here it is. This is how it is.
Yeah, I think we've probably pretty much covered it. I mean, it's a relatively short special, and again, it's pretty straightforward. I will say, just as a quick added thing, there are a couple moments that I thought were like truly pretty funny in it, and I'm always going to be a sucker for the character who's just interested in eating, who talks like this, who's like, hey, do they have mashed potatoes? Like, I'm always going to be a sucker for one of those characters. So like when he's got his little cap pulled down over his eyes and he's like, oh, hey, Emmett, like I was like, that's me, that's who I would be in this film. Like, who do they have mashed potatoes?
My mashed potato spirit animal.
I feel like I can already tell that Steph is going to pull me going, oh, hey, do they have mashed potatoes for the promo?
Of course.
Oh, that is such a promo. Yeah.
Yeah. If you make a funny noise or anything, it's going in the promo. So it's just how I roll. It's so
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it really adds gravitas to those promos. So I appreciate it when you guys.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's the word she chooses. Gravitas. Oscar bait right there. Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's my A24 promo reel. Are we ready for the nuttiest special I've ever seen in my whole life? A Wish for Wings
Hell
at
yeah.
Work.
Yes, absolutely. All right,
I laughed my ass off.
Can I give you guys some background on it?
For sure.
Okay, so I am a comics girl, which I just keep getting cooler and cooler, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
You do. For real.
I'm a huge fan of Bloom County. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it at all, but it's if you figured that like Doonesbury was actually funny or something along those lines, that's kind of Bloom County. It's a comic strip by Berkeley Breathe that began, I believe, in the late 70s. I've got to give credit where it's due. Berkeley Breathe started making fun of Donald Trump in like the early 80s and has been doing it ever since then, which, obviously that's my man right there.
Donald Trump.
Berkeley Breathed. He does these sort of political, but like also very funny and often very sincere and poignant comic strips. I have to find a arc that I'll send to you guys, but we'll table that for later. Anyway, Opus is one of his main characters who shows up, and Bill is the other. Bill allegedly was designed as a reaction to Garfield because Berkeley Breeze wanted to make a character so uncute that they would never make an action figure out of it or a stuffed animal. So he made Bill as sort of the anti-Garfield, which if you look at him, you can kind of see, he's
totally
orange with like black stripes. And I still think Bill's kind of cute, but yeah, so that's kind of the background. If you don't know anything about Bloom County, like it was certainly a more adult comic strip. And then I don't know how in the world this 1991 special got greenlit. I don't know who did it. I don't know what they thought when they read Berkeley Breathe's script for it. I just know that this was like a total game changer for my family. I do believe it only aired once. I'm not positive about that, but I believe it only aired once. And I think people were so confused by what they were seeing that they just never showed it again. I still think it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. There are parts in that make me laugh harder than anything. And just like a very quick Kelly anecdote. I spent years because of that special believing that lobotomies were giant afro wigs, because there is a part in the special where Bill the cat comes out of a store with a giant rainbow afro wig on, and Truffles the pig says to him, "They are giving out the lobotomy coupons in the Little Friskies again," which as a child, I had no idea what that meant. So I was just like, oh, that's what a lobotomy is. It's a wig. And it took
and you walked around saying, I really want a lobotomy.
Lobotomy, yeah.
People are like,
it's my lobotomy costume.
I'm sorry, what?
It took so many years for me to know what Kelly. A lobotomy was and why that joke was funny. Because as my mom and I have discussed many, many times since seeing it in 1991, children are not going to understand almost anything about this special, this animated special. They might understand cute penguin, weird looking cat. There are some things that might be funny, regardless, but for the most part, there's a lot of really funny stuff that is only funny if you are an adult.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of adult humor and like just holy shit, what did they just say kind of stuff, and what did I just watch that is so it's just so fucking good. And I don't know, I mean, Kelly, like, did you read the history about Berkeley like hating this episode?
Yeah, I read that he kind of came around on it a little bit. That like he just sort of felt like maybe it was never really intended for network TV.
Yeah.
And that he didn't necessarily like all of the jokes that the director put in the background. That he felt like there was some sort of like inappropriate.
Did you read? Because he did give an interview and he was talking about how the director who they fired hid a bunch of like offensive stuff in the background, especially like in the opening sequence. And I read that because I didn't notice it, and then I went back and watched. I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Man, that's pretty hilarious."
I would largely agree with Berkeley Breathe that like you don't really need that. Like, there's a lot that's really absurdist and funny without having to like, do that. Like, there's a really there's a part that I really enjoy where he says something about he's talking about how he can't fly, and he says something about it's a fault for which I do not blame my mother. I blame Congress. Right. It's such a weird little like there's so many weird little throwaway lines that are when he's talking about things that are useless and he calls himself an Edsel. I was like, that's so specific. You have to know what an Edsel is for that to be funny at all. And then when he says the next thing that's the most useless is network executives.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's solid work. That's very funny.
Yeah, there's a lot of like zingers. Yeah, I laughed my ass off that. Like, it's one of the very first lines of the show is like, I blame Congress. And I was like, okay, this is, I'm already all in. That's where we're starting with some political humor.
It really excites me that neither of you saw this before, because I feel like I've seen it so many times at this point, and it was released in 91, so I was 5 years old when it came out. So like this has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember / longer. So like I can't really remember what it was like watching it unfold and seeing how deeply bizarre it gets. I mean, I've seen it so many times that like it's not shocking anymore when Opus's ass just stone cold falls off at one point. Or when he establishes that like he saved Bill the cat from a lab where they had replaced his brain with tater tots.
Right.
Or the deeply strange bit where they established that Truffles the pig thinks that he's a water buffalo. Like, there are so many things that are like so strange. Or the flightless bird support group with Robin Williams doing that Kiwi voice. Like, there's so much weirdness in it that like I can't imagine what it's like seeing it the first time. Or when they have the live action sequence from the old movie where he's flying the plane. Like, yeah. I'm so curious to hear what it was like for you guys seeing it.
That threw me off, but I loved it. That was my favorite part of
it. Yeah, you're like, wait, what am I watching? Am I still watching this special?
Did it switch to something else? Like,
it's and I haven't seen this movie, but apparently it's called Lost Horizon from 1937, and it's about a plane crash. But sense. the way that Opus gets inserted into this film is so genius, and it's so like creative and unusual and not like anything you've ever seen. And I was like, just fucking delighted. I love
it's also
shit
the reason
like
why
that.
Whenever I talk about planes, I mention the starboard aleatutor. But
yeah, and I mean the support group you mentioned. I was in tears. I was like, this is so insane. And I am loving every minute of it. Robin Williams, like that. I don't know. Somebody's got to do an impression because it's one of the greatest things that I've ever heard. That whole that whole segment, that whole little speech he gives about his puny kiwi wings not being good enough for Dolores is breathtaking.
That is a go-to thing for my family. With great big wings. Oh, my Dolores.
My puny kiwi wings weren't good enough for Dolores. Oh, no.
She had to leave me for an albatross.
He was on hormones. You heard me. Read my beak. Hormones.
Yeah, it's completely insane. And like there's this adorable little girl who's leading the support group.
Yes.
And there's no logical explanation as to why a small child would be leading the support group of flightless birds.
Or why you would have a cross-dressing cockroach appear.
Which is Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman, yep.
Oh my God. And Robin Williams like used an alias in the credits, and his pseudonym was Sudi Nim.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Pseudonym.
Which is pretty fun. And nobody knew that it was him. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, that's fun. That's a fun little segment.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is like, and I think like one of the things I appreciate about it is that like some of the artwork is really beautiful. When Santa is flying across the sky, like it's beautiful. Like you can tell that Berkeley Breathed is a real artist. And when Opus is swimming across the lake and like the shards of ice pop up behind him, I think all of that is actually gorgeous. It's really very pretty and very scenic, and it's evocative of the cold. Like you kind of can feel that chill in the air. I love Santa putting his hat on Opus. That always kind of gets me a little bit.
Oh, it's so good. It's so
There's
sweet.
a genuine sweetness to all of the weirdness too.
Yeah.
Bill being the one who comes and gets them to tell them to come to Opus. Like,
yeah, I wrote down, I love, because like, you know, obviously there's a message, like the one that he takes the most for granted, which is the annoying cat who ruins everything, who's just like stupid and a pain in the ass, becomes his biggest advocate and ultimately his hero. And then he has that moment of like, this is for you too. Like, come with us, like when he's flying. And it's really fucking sweet. I loved it. Bill
with both trash cans up to his hips.
Right. He's so like sad, but he's not like sad that he's sad. You know, like he's a mess, but he doesn't feel bad about it. He's just like, this is who I am. Do. Everything's fine. And I love that. It's very charming.
Also, Bill never punishes Opus for lashing out at him.
No.
Like, he just kind of understands it. And I mean, I think there's, perhaps because I'm the softest person in the world, I do always get a little emotional at that scene where Bill is just sitting outside of Opus's house and he's got the snow piled up on his head. So, you know, he's been sitting there for like hours, just, you know, hanging out, waiting for Opus to come out and be nice to him.
And then he scratches his ass.
Well, yeah, because Bill is
because
like,
it's Opus and Bill. Yeah.
Right. And Bill's like an absolute disaster.
He is. Yeah.
But like, it's so funny. I was watching it a little bit today and I was thinking like, this is a weird thing to focus on, but it's the best I've ever seen a cat hawking up a hairball rendered. Like when he coughs up that hairball with the Three Stooges ducks around him, that is exactly what my cat looks and sounds like when he hacks up a hairball. But it cracks me up every time that the ducks pull up their skirts.
Yes.
That's always really funny to me.
Like, it's one of the specials that I think every time you rewatch, you're going to see something different. You're going to pick up something different in the background, some little detail, some line of dialogue that's just pitch perfect.
There's a great little thing that I didn't notice the first few times I saw it, and now I notice it every time, where Opus has a portrait behind his bed of a weird looking guy with a cigar in his mouth. And at one point, Opus yawns and the portrait yawns with him.
Oh, I didn't notice that either.
I didn't notice that at all.
Yeah, there is a lot of care taken into everything. And like you said, a lot of background jokes that are really silly, but really fun.
Yeah, and it's not like the groan-inducing kind of like humor where it's like, oh Lord, you know, they're trying too hard, or this is a bit crude or a bit much. It's very well done and it's very perfectly paced, and they sort of just like sneak them in there in a way that you're like, it's enough to you laugh, you notice, you're like, okay, that's great. But then there's a moment of sincerity, or then there's like another like sight gag or something, you know, else really funny. And the pacing is so great and there's so much happening.
I'm so glad, because I was a little worried, like, this is something that my family loves so deeply, but like, we're all a little bit weird. I'm perfectly comfortable acknowledging that. And I have rewatched this special every year since we saw it. And I still love it. That like, I was a little worried that like, even though I still love Opus and Bill, that maybe watching it, you guys would be like, what the fuck is wrong with her?
Never. I will say this in full transparency.
Mhm.
So, I said that you had said, hey, here's the order to watch them in for maximum emotional impact. And
I see what you're saying. I already see where you're going with this.
Delightful, endearing, heartwarming Emmett Otter. And then I start watching A Wish for Wings, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
And, but
there was a reason.
I know. And when I ended it, I was like, you know what? I get it now. But like, as I was starting it, I was like, I'm slightly concerned about Kelly more than usual.
Confused.
Well, but it wasn't just that. I do think that like it brings it on home at the end. Like, because I do think that at the end, A Wish for Wings brings it home. It also is a little bit just because I felt like for the appropriate punch of the Bob's Burgers episode, it was good to have something that was like,
gotta have that palate
exactly.
cleanser. Yeah.
100%. Like, when I ended it, I was like, okay, she knows what she's talking about. She's no dummy. But I did have a moment where I was like, very confused.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. When you saw cockroaches, cross-dressers, and crisis, and you were like, for maximum emotional impact?
I'm not one to judge, but...
Yeah, no, like I said, I do feel like it brings it back, but I also felt more, in some ways more importantly, like it builds you to a place where you're ready for the Bob's Burger, like, gut punch that's about
Which
to
is
come.
a straight kick in the nuts. Yeah, in like the best possible way. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You were a conductor, and this is an orchestra, and it was brilliantly conducted. So, brava.
This was Bob's Burgers season 14, I believe. Jack,
13.
can you back me up on that?
13?
Yeah.
Okay, 13. So I have been watching Bob's Burgers not since the beginning. I didn't come in on the first 2 seasons. I started, I believe, in season 3. Which incidentally is where I kind of feel like it hit its stride. I think in the first 2 seasons, it was trying a little bit too hard to fit into the sort of Family Guy, edgy cartoon mold, with the caveat that there were still some really good episodes in those first 2 seasons. I still feel like it wasn't really the Lauren Bouchard show that I know and love. I'm a big fan of Lauren Bouchard. I think that he does I don't know if you guys ever watched home movies, but I think he does a really good job of having like emotional cores to his shows and an element of sincerity and earnestness that is lacking in a lot of things. So I've been watching since season 3, so long time fan. And since season 3, they've done a Christmas episode. And they've always been pretty amazing, but they've mostly been pretty funny. There's always been heart to them. The first one is Zach Galifianakis thinks that he's a mannequin who's come to life, and wackiness ensues. But like, there's always a lot of sweetness and sincerity and earnestness. So I was ready for something, good and sweet and funny, but like, in the normal realm of these things. And I have always watched the next day on Hulu because, like a lot of people, I don't have live TV. And I'm not going to pay for Hulu Live because it's like way too much money. And I'm semi-poor. I'm a freelancer. So I started seeing all of these things coming up on Twitter when I still used Twitter, about how this was like the most heartbreaking episode, but like in a good way, and like how they bawled and everything. And I was like, I'm a pretty tough guy. I can handle this. I put it on while I was riding a bike, incidentally, and I had to stop because I was crying so hard at the end, in the best way possible. We alluded to in Emmett Otter that there's the sense of not feeling like you're being emotionally manipulated and not feeling like they're intentionally doing things just to make you cry in a way that's unearned. I think that this episode does that so gorgeously, in that I feel like it truly sets out to tell you a really relatively simple, straightforward, earnest story. And it thinks that if it makes you cry in the process, that's fine, but that's not its primary objective. Its primary objective is to tell a story well. And to do something that I think, unfortunately, oftentimes Christmas specials and movies and whatever don't do and don't focus on, which is to really, really, really pay attention to the small moments and to give them the weight and the gravity they deserve, and to sit with them and let them live and breathe and be beautiful and impact you in a way that you feel like you understand. So with that in mind, I'm going to toss it to you, Steph.
Oh, I mean, everything what you said, your summary was absolutely beautiful and spot on. It's hard to like feel like there's a need to say much more than that because you absolutely nailed it. But like, yeah, I had not seen this one, even though I am a Bob's Burgers fan. I haven't seen every episode, but I've seen a lot of them. And I was excited to watch this. And it's so hard to articulate because it's just so fucking perfect. It's so funny and it's so sweet. And again, without being like sugary sweet or, inauthentic, it's just very genuine and really pure. And it is, again, like Emmett Otter, it's about what really matters. And the whole thing isn't about presents and the commercialism and stuff. It's about those special moments that you spend with family and with loved ones and making every moment count and making sure that everyone, feels that they're loved and that they're supported and that they, that what they do is special and who they are is special and that they're the sort of the center of the universe for a moment in time. And, what that's like as a parent to try to make sure that every child is getting the absolute best of you and the most of you at all times, and how hard that is when you're spread so thin and you've got so much and you're trying to juggle so much. And the way that, you'll just go to any lengths imaginable to make that happen. And I love that it's not just about, the love between the parents and the children. It's about the love between the siblings and the relationship that they have and, being there for each other and really like knowing what somebody needs without them saying, which is such a that's kind of the ultimate act of love in my opinion, is to, someone is going to tell you that they don't need you, that they're going to tell you that like, no, it's no big deal. And like, knowing when it is a big deal and knowing, what they need and when they need it. I was sobbing at the end of this. I mean, I am like you, Kelly, I'm a huge softie and it's not hard to pull my heartstrings, but this does it in such a gorgeous, emotionally resonant way that you just feel so good and so whole and so like, okay, I just watched, a silly little holiday special of a comedy animated show and it made me feel so many feels. That's really kind of special and crazy to think about that something like that could have such an impact. But I think they just hit every note so perfectly. That musical, the xylophone concert was just
the Philip
like
Glass composition.
It just it really got me, and I was really blown away by how fucking good it was.
Yeah, I will say that like you said about hitting everything perfectly, like as a youngest child who also was very bad at asking what I needed and remains bad about asking for what I need, like who's used to being kind of like the low key one who doesn't have a lot of needs and who can just like kind of take care of herself. Like I really understood the Louise of it all, the like, I don't want to say I need this or I want this, and the idea of having somebody intuit that, of knowing without you having to say it, of taking away that burden of having to say it, like it is so profound. And every time I've seen it, when Tina walks into that library, I just like lose it. That's usually right about where I go absolutely like just dissolve into tears. And then it's just done through that her song at the end. Like there's just no stopping me. It's all tears. Jack?
100%.
Yep. I don't know how to follow what you guys said because especially with how Stephanie broke it down, because this is one of those shows that I would still enjoy it if I didn't have kids. But because I do have kids, this is like one of those shows where, unlike The Simpsons, where everything is heightened to a degree that it's it's slapstick silly, right? And which is fine.
Now
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But
just as a Simpsons apologist, like there was a time when it was much more grounded.
There was. I will give it that. There was. Well, this is the show that I think the Simpsons could have always been. Right. Yeah. Or was, where it really kind of, yes, there's shenanigans, and yes, it gets a little silly and they break out into musical and stuff. But that's part of the appeal, is that none of that is necessarily outside of the realm of what happens we break out a musical in my house with me and my kids, so the Linda of it is that's a total thing that happens. But just seeing how the husband and wife, how Bob and Linda interact, and they interact with their children. But again, like Steph was saying, how the children interact with each other, outside of all these other animated shows and shit, even outside of a lot of these other live action sitcoms that take place with families, air quotes, that this one really does get it, because it is that sense where, they're all, the Belcher children are all vastly different, wildly different, but they know each other. They don't necessarily always like each other, but they know each other and they love each other. And it's that unstated support that, with siblings, I didn't have siblings, but I watch with my kids where, they're on each other's nerves in 1 minute. And my daughter wants to beat the shit out of my youngest because he's very amped up and he's hyper and he's loud, and we're very quiet and reserved, but even though like he gets on her nerves and you can just see that she's kind of like, if somebody else talks shit about him, if somebody else bumps into him, if somebody else is kind of giving him crap when they're out in public, she will like fucking come to his defense like nobody's business. And you do not want to get on her bad side when it comes to like protecting her siblings. So just seeing Tina come in for Louise at the moment, because she knew what was going on. And even though she had all this other shit happening with her production and her being, the star, which I love that Linda totally blew that out of proportion and thought that she was the star of the show when she's just a star in the show, which was great. But it's just that interaction between those siblings, and just that she knew that with all the other shit that was happening, she knew. And it's the fact that the show can still be true to these characters, because none of them ever act outside of the scope of who they are. And so it's like, right. Louise is going to do this thing. And, of course, Louise is, somewhat psychotic for her age, but she does love her family. She loves Bob in particular, but of course, she's acting weird. And also, but Tina picks up on that. Like, it's just right. the way that it's, and this is like a short episode. I think it's 20 something minutes. I think it's like
standard 23 minutes, probably.
It's very short, but they pack a lot in there. And like, Bob running all over town just trying to be there for his kid, is absolutely something that we do as parents. Like, we don't give a fuck. We will do
Linda
what we have to do.
Getting pulled into the pageant. Yeah.
Exactly. And
I was talking to my mom about that a little bit. Like, it's so believable that Linda would get pulled into this pageant where this overwhelmed mom who's like stayed up all night making the costumes.
She comes to her
every
rescue.
Line, that she would come to the rescue, and that like she'd be devastated by all of this. Like, totally fucking heartbroken. I think I do think that some of what works so well about Bob's is that it's 13 seasons in at this point, and they just know their characters so goddamn well that like all of it feels honest. Like, of course, Louise is the secret softie who has to like hide it behind irony and, isn't going to tell anybody that she wrote a sincere poem, but secretly hopes that, somebody shows up. And of course, Tina is the really like sensitive and attentive person who pays attention to all of Louise's little cues, and picks up on the fact that she's acting a little weird. And of course, like with the Tina that we've watched for 13 seasons, she's going to tell Linda, like, go be with Louise, like, check her out. And of course, Gene is going to be Gene and just like focused on how he can like possibly impress Miss, oh shit, I can't remember what her name is, the music teacher, but that's Gene. Like, as much as he loves his sisters, like, he's mostly Gene focused. And like all of that is just built on the ability of like, we have spent 13 seasons establishing these characters and not deviating from them, building them and making them grow, yes, but doing it within the established parameters of who they are. And so now we've earned the right and the room to have them interact in this way that doesn't have to be based in jokes, and it doesn't have to be like ironic or self-referential or anything like that. It can just be, yes, you know who these characters are, and yes, we know who they are. So their actions feel honest and earned, and they can just be really beautiful and sincere and absolutely like heartbreaking and wonderful. I was saying that I think at the end, there's this really great thing that they do where like they don't rush the Philip Glass composition. They really let you like listen to this beautiful composition that Philip Glass, I believe, specifically tailored to Bob's Burgers to make it sound like it could be played by sixth graders on xylophones. And it just lets you listen to this beautiful music and to kind of be in the moment. And then it kind of keeps going, and they show Linda cleaning out Bob's open wounds while he reads the poem to her, and then Jean showing the video to Miss Lebons, or not Lebons. Lebons is Merkin, Miss Merkin. That's right. Because she's a ridiculous name, Miss Merkin. And all of these just like really small moments that are just really poignant because they're really like human moments. And they don't have to be big and over the top, and they don't have to be like, you know, the soldier comes home just in time for Christmas, or, you know, the dog pulls little Susie from the well, or whatever. Like, they can just be these really quiet, little intimate moments that feel like a real family and that feel like real people in a really, I think, moving and profound way.
Yep.
And, you know, like, you know, bringing it into reality that this is a Christmas that they will always remember. And this will be one of those like fond memories of, yeah, I remember that really special Christmas. And there's like humor. It's like kind of a funny story, but it's also really sweet. And you think about the memories that you have, and you don't remember like, a lot of times you don't remember like the big, like you'll kind of casually remember the big grand stuff. You know, you may remember a present or two, but what you remember is those small moments that are just about being with the people you love and about reinforcing the bonds that you have. And I think it's, they do it in a really powerful way where you're just like, this is a very special memory that is born out of chaos. It's born out of being stressed and being like, oh, I can't do enough and all these things. But then it ends in the realization of like how kind of blessed you are and how powerful the love is and the bonds that you share. And it's really remarkable.
It's more true to life as a you know, animated show. It's more true to life than most live action shows I think ever could be. And it is because, like, you know, Kelly was saying, we've spent so long with these characters, if you've been keeping up on the show, that you know their foibles and you know their faults, but you also know, you know, what a tight and loving family unit they are, you know. And it's like, you know, especially at the very end when they're just sitting, you know, Bob and Linda are just sitting on the couch with their coffee, just watching the kids be kids, you know, and all that other shit that kind of melts away. And they're just, all three of them are just sitting in front of the Christmas tree, just yabbering on about whatever, you know, and it's not even about the presents at that point. It's like you said, it's just about being in the vicinity and in the presence of the people that you love and the people that get you, you know. And so, you know, that little slice of, yeah, that one little shot is more on point than most other shows could ever be. And I love this show because it really does capture the chaotic but loving feel of a family just trying to get through their day, you know, and all the little hiccups that happen along the way, you know, that kind of throw you for a loop, and sometimes even test your patience or test your bond, you know, but at the end they pull through. And it was just this one. I think this is how, you know, Kelly did kind of time it perfectly. This was the one to bring it home. This was how it had to end, you know?
Yeah. Well, and, you know, as in a structural standpoint, as a writer, I was just thinking about how unbelievably tight that script is. Like the amount that they managed to fit into such a short period of time, and the very, very careful way that they dole out the time between each of the three siblings. Because, like, yeah, it's a Bob and Linda story to some extent, but like it's primarily a sibling story, and really primarily a Tina and Louise story. But like Gene's got his bit too. But like I was thinking, like, it's really brilliant the way that they periodically check in with Louise and they just listen to her inner dialogue. You know, like it's such a non-flashy thing to do, but to just have her thinking things like, did I put my tights on backwards? Like all of these like little things. And like, oh, I could read the silly poem. Like I could read the reindeer poop poem. Like all of those things are so humanizing. And they're so like, even though Louise is supposed to be a 9-year-old in a library, you know, getting ready to read her poem, like they're also relatable in such a specific way of like feeling unmoored and feeling nervous about something, scared about something. And the way that like when somebody you love shows up, and not just shows up, but like heard the things that you were too scared to tell them.
Yes.
You know, like,
yeah.
because she was communicating to Tina in her own way, in her own Louise way. And the fact that Tina was able to read those things, like that she knows Louise well enough and she was able to interpret them, and that then she showed up for her, and like didn't just show up for her, but showed up for her at the expense of her own thing. Like, it's such a profoundly beautiful gesture and such a like a moving moment, especially like, I mean, it would be for any age, but like if you figure Tina's supposed to be 13, you know, like to do that for your 9-year-old sister and to show up for her like that, it's just like, it's so lovely. And Kristen Schall's voice work for Louise reading that poem, like the little waver in her voice, you know, even the way that like, of course it's a Louise poem. And again, they just know their characters so well. So like, she's got a joke about like Jean farting in the poem, you know, but like all of it is so beautifully delivered by Kristen Schaal in the way that she still manages, like, despite the fact that Kristen Schaal is, I'm guessing, like almost 50 years old, like she still kind of captures that like 9-year-old sense of like uncertainty and nervousness and fear. And maybe that's because that's like a universal thing. Like that's not specific to being 9 years old. Like when you're doing something that kind of frightens you and when you're being vulnerable and open in that way, like it touches a nerve.
And it really speaks to, I mean, I think many of us can relate to that feeling of really wanting someone to see you without you having to say it, you know, like without you having to, you don't feel comfortable asking for what you need, but you're desperate for someone to just know and to read your mind and to give you what you need without you having to ask for it. And
especially
you know,
if you feel like I'm sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to say, especially if you feel like the thing that you need is some sort of a like
silly
betrayal of, you know, your,
like you're embarrassed, you feel vulnerable. You're embarrassed about like wanting that thing and you don't want to ask for it because that's even more vulnerability. But you're, you know, but deep down, you're just, all you want is for someone to like know you well enough to just get it without you saying it. And then you didn't have to ask for it. They just gave it to you. And what a fucking gift that is. And it rarely happens because people can't read your mind and most people don't know. And, you know, if you say like, hey, no, don't come to this, most people will be like, oh, well, because she doesn't want me to come to it. And to have somebody that gets you enough on a real, like, visceral level to know, like, you said you don't want this, but I know deep down you do, even if you would never admit it, even to yourself, and I'm gonna give it to you, and you never have to thank me for it because you didn't ask me for it. You just have to like know in your heart that I did it. Like, it's such a fucking gift and so rare and so beautiful, and it destroyed me in the most beautiful way possible. It was just glorious.
Well, that's the thing, like Bob's Burgers is just like, it's such a perfectly oiled machine, and like not in the way that like some shows become perfectly oiled machines and that they know their formula, you know, and they just like, it's a beautifully oiled machine, and that like it is, I personally believe that after all of these seasons it's still a labor of love. Like it still feels to me like the people who are making it care so much about what they're doing, and they care so much about the characters and, you know, about creating something real and beautiful. And if anything, I feel like Bob's has only gotten more so in later seasons, that they've just committed harder to making something beautiful and earnest and profound. And sometimes just like completely foregoing the concern about laugh lines of just like,
oh, for sure.
You know, it's not going to be heavy necessarily, but like we're more interested in telling a story that's true to these characters and, you know, that maybe people will connect with in some way, which I absolutely love for it. And I think that one of the things that like I really, really loved about it was that after this like absolutely devastating moment where Tina comes in and Louise reads her poem, and, you know, there's the triumph of Jean's xylophone show. Which I don't know if you guys caught this, but made me genuinely laugh that it was called It's the Most Xylophone Time of the Year.
Yeah.
I thought that was very funny. But that then in the car ride on the way home, Tina looks at Louise and says something like, Louise loves her family, Louise loves her family. And it's one of those things that, again, is really founded in the idea that, like, Tina knows her sister and she loves her sister, and that doing that isn't really making fun of her. It's giving her a release.
Yeah.
It's kind of giving her an escape valve of like, okay, we're going to make a joke out of it because you were so sincere. And I know that that makes you uncomfortable. So I'm going to give you like a chance to tell me to shut up or whatever. Like, I'm just going to make kind of like a little joke so you can have that relief of like, you don't have to sit in the sincerity of your emotions. And I thought, like, what a subtle, beautiful thing to do, that like Tina knows her sister so well that she knows that like having been viewed that way, having been viewed vulnerably would make her feel uncomfortable. So I'm going to make a joke about it. And that will make her feel a little more comfortable.
And she doesn't do the whole thing of like, oh my God, I had no idea you felt this way. That was so sweet. That was so like surprising. She doesn't do any of that shit that would make you feel more like exposed and vulnerable. She's just like,
especially for
you love your
like
family.
Louise.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's a beautiful observation for sure, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah, there's so much that's so honest and just perfect in it. Like even dumb little things like Bob going to the wrong library. I was like, you know, I would say that's over the top, but I've done dumb shit like that before.
It's not.
Or, like,
it's not that dumb. Yeah.
Right. Like you end up at the wrong place, especially if you're like kind of
in a panic.
In a panic and you're not thinking straight. Yep.
I do that. Like, I probably did that last week more than once of just like doing some dumb, stupid thing because I was like panicked and not thinking.
Well, and this show gets marriage too, because I think there's a right in there at the beginning where it's like they're trying to figure things out, and Bob's like, "I only know what she knows." Like when you talk about Linda, I only know what she knows, which is like the most accurate husband and father line like ever delivered in a show ever. Like because when for a lot of families. A lot of the family unit, it's the mom that's on top of all this shit. So the husband's just like, tell me where to go. Yep. What am I got to do? You know, so I love the fact that in this one, they're like, yeah, he doesn't know shit other than what Linda tells him. He's like, I love my kids, but I don't know what's going on. You tell me, wife, you tell me, boss, you know?
Well, and I also really love the idea that, you know, best laid plans. It's like as much as she wants to be super mom and she's doing everything right and she's doing everything she can, you can only do so much. You know, if you're one person, you can only, you know, you can be there as much as you can for everyone, but you're still going to feel like you fall short because you can't be in more than one place at the same time. You can't, you know, clone yourself. And how painful that is for somebody, you know, like Linda and like a lot of moms who are just like, I want everything to be perfect. I want every memory to be special. I want everyone to feel equally loved. I want, you know, everything to be untainted. And inevitably that's not possible because life and just being able to navigate that and come out at the other side of it and be like, okay, everything doesn't have to be perfect. I don't, you know, every memory doesn't have to be magical, but we need to hold on to what we do have and what is special and beautiful.
Yeah, I'm one of three. I don't know exactly. Jack, you said you have no siblings. Steph, do you have siblings?
I have an older sister.
Okay, well, I'm one of three. So this was very immediately relatable. Like when I showed my mom this, she was like, oh my God, like immediately sympathized with Linda's whole like, oh no, I have three kids and somehow all of their shit landed on the same night. And I really appreciated the care that Bob's took to having it that like one thing is a school thing, one thing is a Thunder Girls thing, and one thing is a library thing. Because like in theory, a school thing, like the school would probably not schedule, you know.
Yeah, they would.
Right, they wouldn't have all of them on the same night. But like they're all three different organizations. So it absolutely could happen that they'd all be at the same night at the same time. It
happens. Oh, that totally happens.
It might not be like super likely, but it's possible. It's entirely possible.
It's as rough. It's as rough as the show makes it out, because you as a parent then feel like whatever choice you make is the wrong choice. Right. Because because at this point now you're playing favorites, even though you're not. It's going to seem like you are. And it is like, it's a no-win situation. It is tough. It is tough to be in multiple places like that.
Yeah, and a lot of times with like a three group like we were, there's one kid who's a little bit more likely to be like, no, it's fine, just go do your thing. And that was usually me as a kid. So like I understood like the Louise kind of, like, no, go, it's fine, whatever, I'll take care of myself. Like, I also was always a little weird about having attention. So like I got that. But like, I'm sure that like as a parent, you still know that like that kid is somewhat putting it on, that like, oh yeah, there's some degree of sincerity of like truly being uncomfortable with attention and whatever. But like, there's also some part of that kid that's like, but also like show up for me,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Totally and maybe in some ways as a parent, you feel more like you have to show up for that kid who's never asking you to show up.
You do.
Like
you do.
So like like I told you, when my mom saw this one, it really hit her hard because she was like, yeah, I've totally been in that position. I had 3 of you, and that was like a real thing. And I think like it's such a clever conceit that I'm surprised a sitcom or anything hasn't really done it before, of like this very like low stakes in the like cosmic scheme of things, but like on a personal level, the stakes feel so incredibly high, of both disappointing a child, but also of being disappointed, and of the weight that you might feel as Tina of like, well, I don't want you to be at my thing at the expense of Louise's thing, there are so many very clever and very like relatable dynamics at play that I think are much more relatable than a lot of the things that Christmas specials or media tend to focus on, that are really like heartbreaking, and a different kind of stress and tension that it's again surprising to me that nothing's ever really explored it before, when it's such a rich and
relatable
relatable exactly area to really dive into.
Absolutely.
For me, it's kind of also like, as a writer, it's kind of what I want to be, like somebody who can touch on these really human things and not feel the need to overblow things, to not create larger drama or whatever, but just to find the humanity in these things. And truly, like, I think there's something so beautiful about the fact that this episode never like wallows in anything resembling sadness. Like, no, it is a joyful episode by all accounts. Like, it's the joy of having too much, it's the joy of too many. You have these 3 kids you love so much. It's too much love. It's too much, Christmas joy. It's too many things to do, too many options. Like, it's all too much instead of too little, and not pain exactly, but like, it's all kind of joy to me. And when I cry, it's not like a sad cry. It's the cry of like, oh, she showed up. There she is. She came. And like, also this beautiful fucking Philip Glass arrangement in the background that's just like ripping my heart out. And then that her song over the credits, like, which is so beautiful too. Like, just an absolutely gorgeous. What's that?
I was just gonna say, it's not like, it really is a special talent to be like, all right, I'm going to write something that's like very genuinely funny without like feeling like I'm being jokey. I'm going to write something that's very emotionally resonant without being schmaltzy or being manipulative. I'm going to write something that's going to make you cry without, again, being like, oh, here's the thing that's going to make you cry. Time to cry now. It's just going to be a very genuine, earned tears that come because it's so relatable, and just writing something that is just so real and so honest and so sincere and straightforward, that does all the things that you want it to do, but without it feeling like there's some I don't know, like master plan at work where it's like somebody sitting, because a lot of times you can feel it. You can feel the writer sitting at a table being like, okay, now we need the big scene where, the big climax or the big amount of drama, or we need the big like conflict, or this is the time I want somebody to cry. And you don't feel any of that. You just feel like it is just a very sincere, straightforward story that just hits all the right beats, and you can connect with it almost no matter who you are. Like, if you have kids, absolutely. Even if you've been a child and what that, and you have siblings, if you've ever been like somebody who's trying to, please a lot of different people at the same time and haven't been able to do it, or it just kind of no matter what your life experiences are, whatever you're bringing to the table, you're going to probably be able to take something out of this, and it's going to resonate and mean something. And that is not easy to do. It's really not. And it's really impressive.
Not at all. And I think like to also manage to make the jokes land is a pretty impressive ability. I know people have mixed feelings about Linda. I love her, but like she has one of my favorite Linda jokes in the entire series in this episode, which is Bob is complaining about the fact that he went to the wrong library branch, and he says something about there should only be one library. And she says, well, I wouldn't run for office on that platform. It makes me laugh so hard every time. Like, that's such a good line. Like, there are so many actually really good jokes in this episode. Most of them are Gene related, to be fair. Like, he definitely has the lighter touch in all of this. And Tina Fey is a great guest star. Like, she's funny as the substitute. But my favorite creative writing teacher of all time said, you have to make people laugh before you can make them cry. And I feel like this episode really gets that. Like, it has a lot of good little jokes. Like you said, Jack, about the line about like, I only know what she knows. Like, it's really honest, but it's also funny. Like, you know, and there's a pretty funny thing where when Bob gets back from trying to get to the library, Courtney's dad says something like, what happened to you, Bob? Did you see what life would be like if you weren't in it? And, there's a lot of stuff that's like genuinely funny in it as well. And that just makes the emotion like, but at the same time, it's not like then it feels like it's a left turn to go into sincerity. Like, it's been there the entire time. It's just that it's got these jokes that fit well within the world that they've created. Like, it feels like it just fits well into the world that they've created and the environment they've created. And it's all just, I think it's so lovely. I think what Bob's Burgers has always done exceptionally well is paint this picture of a flawed family who loves each other so goddamn much that like, even when they fight and even when they let each other down, like, there's just never any doubt that there's so much love in this family. And I think that to posit a situation where it's nobody's fault, you know, like, it's not that anybody's doing the wrong thing or fucking up or anything like that. Like, it's just that the circumstances have made it so that, like, you know, this is just a bad situation. Like, it's the care and the time and the characterization and the writing that's gone into making them feel like, yeah, you know what? These people care so much about each other and they would try so hard to be there for each other, but there's no way around this. There's no good answer. And that then, of course, Tina would find the good answer because that's who Tina is.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head, because a lot of the shows, especially like The Simpsons or whatever, revolves around where people, I mean, yeah, ostensibly they love each other, but they really they're always at each other's throats. Yeah, they really kind of hate each other. And this is like one of those few shows where none of the characters hate each other. I mean, they might get exasperated, they might lose patience, they might get frustrated, you know, but there is genuine love and care between all of these characters. And I think a lot of shows don't really touch on that, or they feel like they have to lean into the drama and, you know, the shenanigans that come out of a family that doesn't, you know, where you can have just as much drama but even more payoff for the family that does, you know, because then you're not swerving out of left field when somebody does something like kind and you're like, well, you've been a dick to somebody for 18 episodes. Why are you just now being nice? You know, where this episode's like, no, we're always nice to each other. We love each other. We just have our moments, you know? So I think I love it when a show doesn't feel like it needs to rely on the tropes of the established medium where it's, you know, somebody has to hate each other or somebody has to be better than, or think they're better than anybody else or whatever, that they all genuinely have affection, you know?
Yeah. Like I said, I've cried every time I've seen it. And I anticipate crying every time I continue to see it, because for me, this is an annual watch because it's just so lovely.
Yeah.
Well, you've definitely introduced me to some new annual traditions, so I'm very grateful and appreciate the gift of this episode and the gift of this show and the gift of you two. Not to get super saccharine and schmaltzy, but yeah, just incredibly grateful. So thank you for this and for all the joy all year long. I very much appreciate it.
Oh, it's been wonderful. And thank you guys for indulging me with 3 Christmas specials.
And now for our closing arguments.
You know, if you are tired of, or not tired of, but just want something that's maybe a little bit different from the standard fare, if you've seen every version of A Christmas Carol 17 times and you get it, you know, Scrooge was saved and all that happy horse shit. And, you know, It's a Wonderful Life is a perfect movie, and I'm never going to have any notes on that either. But you've seen it. You know, if you're looking for something different, I think all 3 of these are movies that have a lot to, or specials that have a lot to bring to the table. Opus and Bill is certainly the lightest of the 3, but I think that all of them have a soft, nougaty belly. And I think that certainly, unless you are a lot harder than me, the Bob's Burgers episode will make you weep.
Well, you picked 3 films that are wildly different in style and approach. I love that they all, in their own different way, share this fundamental theme, which is that the true meaning of Christmas lies not in perfection, but in love, sacrifice, and acceptance. And they, especially taken in tandem, they remind us that the holiday spirit is about connection, understanding, and celebrating our shared humanity in all its imperfect glory, which I think we need now more than ever. And I think that that's why this selection for us was such a gift, and why I have absolutely no notes.
Oh, geez, Steph. Wow. Holy shit.
Sorry.
All right. No
I'm
notes
very,
on Steph's no notes.
I'm very like squishmallow on the inside because of this. So it's like all ooey gooey.
Because, you know, Steph brought up a good point that, you know, these 3 specials are wildly different, you know, but I think the one thing that I took away from it more than anything else is that regardless of how they're tackling it, these 3 specials are really about found family, you know, or family, whether it's found family or blood family. You know, these 3 specials really talk about the people that are in your life that matter, and the people that are in your life that support you, whether they do it, you know, right up front on the front lines, or whether they're doing it behind the scenes. And I think that both need to be represented, because both make a family. Is that you can have people that are your cheerleaders, you know, constantly all out there, you know, shouting your praises to the world, but there's got to be a shout out to the people that are behind the scenes, doing it quietly, doing it without you even noticing it. Sometimes it's one of the things, especially being a parent, that you bring to the table with your kids, is that they don't get to see a lot of the sacrifices that you make for them. They don't get to see a lot of the things that go in behind the scenes to make sure that they get to do something that they want to do, or they can show up to a thing they want to be a part of, or whatever. And I think, you know, that of course Bob's tackles that very well, but just all 3 of these episodes really just bring home that it's about the people that are in your circle that matter. And that, yes, I mean, Christmas is fantastic and we all love it, but the real, I think the joy of Christmas isn't the presents. It isn't the, you know, all the gossamer and the spectacle of it all. I think really it's just being around the people that you love and making those memories, whether they're big or small. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, that's the stuff that you carry with you. Like, you know, you don't remember the gifts. You remember that somebody was there for you. You remember the laughter. You remember just those either loud or quiet moments with your people by your side. And I think these 3 episodes really do capture that better than almost anything else that I've seen. So absolutely no notes.